this grant program that we worked hard last spring to get passed in the state legislature. And thanks to funding from the Illinois Department of Agriculture, we have the opportunity to fund local food infrastructure across the state of Illinois, and look forward to sharing more information about the grant, as well as seeing what project proposals come in from our great community of local food system advocates and collaborators. So today's agenda will give you a little bit of background on the local food infrastructure grant. We will cover the key grant details, including the timeline, eligibility, funding and award limits, some examples, not all examples of funding requests, and then some proposals that may receive preference as well. I will cover available resources, and then most of our time, our goal is to answer your questions and make sure we're getting the most information out there to help you as you craft your project proposals. I failed to introduce myself. I'm Josh Snedden. I am a farmer at Fox at the Fork in Monee. I also am grateful for the opportunity to be the grant program coordinator working for the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. You know, I'm a member, I'm a farmer, and now I'm a staff member, helping make sure all of this funding can get out to our community that we hold dearly in our hearts. So a little bit about the grant. We have $1.8 million available to invest in critical infrastructure, including things like scaling up processing, aggregation, and distribution of local food to meet the needs of Illinois communities. You might ask, what do we mean by local food? In the case of this grant program, we are defining local food as food raised, produced, or grown in Illinois. It is funded through the Illinois Department of Agriculture, so that means it is funded with state dollars, taxpayer dollars, through appropriations. And the Illinois Stewardship Alliance was simply selected as the administrator of the grant. So you'll see this disclaimer at the bottom of the screen. We have been contracted to administer the grant. Illinois Stewardship Alliance is a nonpartisan 501c3 nonprofit located in Springfield. Membership or affiliation with the Illinois Stewardship Alliance is in no way connected to grant awards. So now that we've got that said, we'll move into more of the grant details, which I'm sure is really why y'all are here. So the application is currently open. We are closing that application on Wednesday, January 31st. So altogether 62 days to craft your project proposals and get them submitted. The final award decisions will be completed by a review committee of farmers and food system advocates by mid-February, and then funding will be disseminated March of 2024. The funding for this grant will be disseminated upfront. We do not anticipate that any projects will have spent their grant money before receiving the rewards. Eligibility. So proposals may be submitted by individuals, groups, partnerships, or collaborations. Eligible applicants must currently or plan to store, process, package, aggregate, or distribute farm products raised in Illinois. Applicants should be established operations and should be able to demonstrate environmental stewardship, economic profitability, and social equity in their operation. Proposals must be for purchasing, leasing to own, renting, building, or installation of infrastructure. So keyword here, and it's in the name of the grant, it is for infrastructure that will increase market access of our Illinois communities to Illinois agricultural products. Grants are up to $150,000 for full or partial funding of a purchase or project. And an entity will only be eligible to receive one award under this program. So a few things here at the bottom. Grant funding may not be used for, again, not used for, labor, marketing, or promotional activities. So just to reiterate, it is the local food infrastructure grant. And so we're really looking for project proposals that invest in infrastructure. So funding award and limits, a minimum of 12 grants, though more are possible. Those minimum awards will be $1,000. So looking for projects of a minimum of $1,000. Maximum grant award, $150,000. So your project does not have to be capped at $150,000. Maybe you have a larger scale project and you just want this grant to fund part of that. The grant funding is up to $150,000 through this program. And again, only eligible to receive one award under this program. And feel free, if I'm going too fast, to just throw up a hand or something. But really want to make sure we focus on questions and answers today. So this is a list, although not an exhaustive list, of some examples that we've brainstormed to help you get thinking about potential projects. Really, so some things here, and I won't read the list verbatim, but equipment used in production of value-added agricultural products. That could be milling, pressing, creamery, dairy, produce, maybe taking a cottage food business from, cottage food to commercial distribution by way of investing in commercial infrastructure, commercial kitchen space to do that. Grading, packing, labeling, packaging, or sorting equipment. And then, refrigerated trucks. So how do we get the produce, meat, dairy, et cetera, from farm to table? Oftentimes it needs to be transported to a grocery store or a cooperative. And then, investments in technology and digital infrastructure to assist with aggregation or distribution of products. So this includes software. Maybe you're a distributor or expanding into distribution and need to invest in software to help your farms and growers to be able to share with you what they have available, and then for you to be able to purchase it and get it to the end user. So that is thought of as types of infrastructure. And then, really any supply chain infrastructure to transport, coordinate, aggregate, and distribute products from multiple sources. So again, thinking about, how do we get the food from multiple farms to our communities? There are various types of infrastructure that can help do that. So I see a couple of questions related to this slide. So what are food hub development or expansion examples? So one example would be like a food cooperative. Maybe a community is working on opening a local cooperative, and they've been established and are trying to just like get that physical space. So that would be one example. Maybe it's also a distributor type location. Maybe it's an on-farm consolidator. We're gonna, instead of just selling our grown products, we're gonna provide a space for many farms to come through. Can funds be used for education? So this is an infrastructure grant focused on that. So farmers may apply for funding to cover a particular training program towards scaling up or infrastructure. Education programs will not be funded. So thank you, Liz, for putting that in the chat. And so I'm seeing a lot of questions. I'm going to come back to those. I'm going to get through my details because otherwise I'm going to get bogged down. So thank you. We're going to pause there on the questions. Local food infrastructure grant details. So preference shall be given to the following. So this is the local food infrastructure grant program is funded for 1 year at this time. And since there's not a guarantee, funding will be available in multiple years. A team of farmers and advocates have selected a few categories where preference shall be given. So collaborative, multi-farm, or multi-operation local food system projects. Proposals that have established favorable community support. Proposals that have a positive economic impact on the state's local food sector. Those that increase availability of agricultural products to underserved communities in Illinois. Proposals submitted by or that positively impact underserved farmers in Illinois, including socially disadvantaged, veterans, and limited resource. We are using defined by the USDA, and then those that facilitate long-term economic development as well in the food system. We have a lot of resources we've started to put together for people. So there is a website with all of the information that we're sharing today, and then this deck, as well as the recording of this webinar, will also be shared on the website. So that's illinoiselfig.org. We have an FAQ document that we continue to update as we receive more questions. And certainly after this call, there will be a lot of questions to add, I'm sure. There are some application templates available. These are downloadable Word documents that you may use to craft your application prior to then going online and actually submitting the form online. We thought this was a great way for people to maybe think about, iterate, improve their application prior to submitting it. Two different templates, one for individual projects that would be defined as one entity applying on their own. And then a collaborative project would be two or more entities who have crafted a joint project proposal and are submitting a sort of a shared or collaborative project, in which case one applicant would submit that application listing out all of the entities who are collaborating. There is a sample scoring sheet. So this is the document that will be used by our team of reviewers to score all applications. And then there's a sample budget template as well. It is a part of the grant application that you submit a budget for your project. What will the funds be spent on? How will you be spending them? And so we drafted a simple to use budget template. We are also open, if you have one you use, we can review that as well, but trying to make things as easy as possible to get as many applications as possible submitted. So where can you get questions answered beyond this webinar? We are also hosting a series of office hours events. You may choose to participate in the office hours. Maybe you've got follow-up questions of the questions you have today, or if you really want to get specific into your project and what you're thinking about and ask very specific questions, the office hours will be a great time to do that as well. We expect it to be a little bit more of an intimate group. I don't think we'll have the same level of attendance on each one of those. You can register to get your Zoom link through that Illinois LFIG website, through this deck when it is sent out, or if you are on the mailing list for the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. We've also sent some notes about the office hours in the past week. And then there's also a contact form on the website if you have a question that maybe you can't make in office hours or you want to get it submitted prior to attending. There's a form there as well that you can submit. All right, so the moment you've all been waiting for was finally here. Let's get to some questions. So while you think about your questions, we are open if people want to raise their hand, take themselves off mute, and ask verbally, that's great. Otherwise, I'm going to try and check out the chat a little bit. I see a lot of questions coming in. So I'll start there, but feel free to raise your hand while I'm answering some of these questions. Can this grant be given to a group that raises link money to distribute to shoppers at a farmer's market? The grant funding is intended for infrastructure, so it would really be focused on if there are investments of tech or infrastructure needed for the acceptance, that may be considered. Sorry. All right. David asks, does this fund purchasing such as lease, shared ownership, and location, multiple property owners, et cetera? So I believe what you're asking, David, is can this be used for shared ownership locations where there are multiple property owners? The answer is yes. If you're making the argument that the infrastructure that is shared and owned is beneficial for the community and for growing the local food system, then yes, we would encourage you to apply and submit your case and make the argument to the review committee in your application for why it is beneficial and the value of your project. I'm going to pause from the Q&A and I'm going to go over to Chris McGregor. I saw your hand first.
Hello. Yeah, I just had two questions, real quick. First one, can the money be used, the grant money be used for the purchase of food itself?
So this program cannot be used
Okay.
for the purchase of the food itself.
Okay, and then my second question, I know that labor is not included in this. I assume that means for like paying employees or something like that, but can it be used for contracted services, like if you're paying an app developer or something like that?
Interesting. We haven't gotten that question before. So I guess in the example, the app developer would be building a software that
Yeah,
may be
exactly. Would be
infrastructure.
just hypothetically, if we were developing an app for customers to purchase the food or to somehow distribute the food that we're aggregating or something like that. I know that the technology is a part of the infrastructure that you mentioned, and I just wasn't sure if developing like a actual like our own homegrown technology system or something like that would be possibly included with that.
Yes, so I believe that would be included. I would encourage you to apply certainly with that because you're investing in infrastructure that requires a specialist. You're not just paying for labor to do work. You're actually purchasing an app, and part of that is a contractor to build the app.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So
Okay.
yes, we would include that.
All right. Those are my two questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Tatum, I believe you were next. I think these are in order.
Yeah, hi, thank you for taking my question. And I guess this is just more clarification. I hear you say project proposal, where project to me is like beginning, middle, and an end, right? It's kind of definitive, whereas infrastructure is more of like a capital cost for like a freezer unit or something. So I just wanted to make sure kind of definitions of words that are being used.
Yeah, so infrastructure would include freezers, fridges, cold storage. I guess it's not broadly, you don't have to have a broad defined project with a beginning, middle, and end. However, in your application, there are questions around how that infrastructure is going to be used and the value it's going to deliver for your community and the local food system. And so I can do some clarifying on the FAQ in terms of what we mean by project. But sometimes the proposal may be as simple as I need freezers to store meat for this community. And it's a longer term vision and not just a project such as building an app is going to be a longer term project. So yes, you're correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Brian.
Hey, how are you doing?
Brian.
Quick question. So, okay, I think you covered this part, but you can upload your own budget sheet. You don't have to use the one that you provided. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. And then two more quick questions. The first question is, we are in the process of building a new facility on our farm, and we have a chunk of it done. It is not, but a lot of it is not funded. So can I go ahead and can I include in my proposal anything that is not currently funded or paid for?
That is correct. So for projects that maybe have started and are in progress, you may use the funds to continue to advance or finish that project.
Okay.
Very specifically, you cannot use funds to repay prior debt payments. So if you took out a loan and you've already paid against that loan, you can't use these funds to say, well, I've already paid $10,000 in a loan. But for finishing a project, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. And then, well, let me ask you, so if okay, no, that's fine. So that, no, that's it. That's all I got. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and feel free to come to open office hours if you want to get very specific on your project. Or
yeah,
submit
can I
the
just
contact
email you
form to
because
us.
I feel like I don't want to take up too much of everybody else's time. Can I message you because I don't think I'll be able to make it up there. Is that okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to go next to Emilio Arajo.
Hello, how's it going? I have two questions. The first one being, so I work for a nonprofit in Chicago, and we run a food pantry. We do food distribution, but we are opening a new building, and we want to have an urban farm in that space. Is that eligible for this grant?
Yes, so that would be eligible.
Excellent.
For your nonprofit. Again, provided you're investing in infrastructure.
Yes,
Yep.
the infrastructure piece of the urban farm.
That's the key word we want to make sure people understand. Thank you.
Love it. And then the second part to that is we are developing like a hub to be able to support other food pantries in the area, and we work with another organization that does procurement, and they recently got like a Illinois Eats grant and do that LFPA, like procuring food from Illinois farmers. But we don't do that kind of procurement step. We just do the distribution. Could the build out, that infrastructure piece of the food distribution center, be part of this grant as well? Is that eligible?
Yes, that is eligible. You actually bring up a great potential example of a collaborative project where you and your organization could collaborate with your food hub partners to maybe think holistically about what is needed to finish out that project and make sure the food is getting where you're intending.
Excellent. And on that note, are we required to do a collaborative, or is it like if I talk to them and we can do it individually? Either way, excellent.
Yes, correct. Collaborative or individual projects are open.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Welcome. All right. I saw Motherland Gardens. You lowered your hand, but I'm just going to make sure that was intentional.
No, I didn't lower it. I have an issue with connection. Thank you so much for taking a question. I'm probably going to send an email with many questions, but one question that I have is, we are on the process of extending our project and to increase farm acreage. My question is regarding any kind of infrastructure that go into that, like adding the water, improving the land, and doing soil testing. Are all those land improvement and kind of work covered under this grant?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, you're focused on the infrastructure, wells, soil testing. That's infrastructure specific to
increase farm acreage and produce more.
Thank you. So we'd encourage you to still apply. However, this is more focused on like the food system supply chain infrastructure. So getting the food from the farm out to the communities. So things like soil tests, those types of items would not be covered
Okay.
under this program.
Perfect. And the second question that I have is, if you are building a high tunnel, have the high tunnel that you are building, will you use this funding to pay for labor to install that high tunnel, for example?
This grant would not be eligible for the high tunnel labor.
Okay. And if you are installing a like upgrading or installing a commercial kitchen for food processing, aggregation, storage, and distribution, this grant will cover it.
Yeah, it would cover all the infrastructure for the commercial kitchen. Correct.
Okay, I'll probably send the rest through the email because I really have I have some couple of it, but I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yep, happy to answer questions that way as well. All right. So it looks like Liz, thank you, Liz. You've been answering a lot of the questions in the chat. So I'm just gonna see what else is open, and feel free to raise your hands, ask questions, or just jump in. There's no hands raised, so if anyone's got a question, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
Yes, I do have a question for you.
Yes. Hello.
So as far as labor not being covered, and I know this has been addressed a couple of times, but if we're doing true infrastructure upgrades and need an electrician or concrete poured or labor is covered under those kinds of services, correct? Like we can, it can be used as part of, you know, contractor costs.
Yes, correct. So I think we meant labor more like paying farm labor,
Employees.
or employee labor, et cetera. But if you're expanding infrastructure and it's beyond your skill set and you need to hire somebody, then yes, you know, and certainly make it clear in the application the value of that.
And building code and zoning permits and all of that sort of thing.
I don't know that we've talked about that.
Or are we better off making that one of the costs that we're addressing as a farm?
I'm going to take that question away, Anne.
Okay.
We haven't spent time specifically talking about permitting and zoning, and I don't want to give you an incorrect answer.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up on Anne's question. For anyone involved in construction, are there bid requirements, with this being state dollars, are there bid requirements or labor requirements that have to be followed?
No, at this time, since the Illinois Stewardship Alliance was chosen as the administrator, we are not requiring any sort of bid requirements on any of this.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right, let me get back to my chat box.
Josh, I had a question.
Yes.
Real quick, if we're a fiscal partner of a couple different organizations, would you advise that we submit one? You said there's only one grant applied per organization. How would you suggest we handle that, to write one grant to represent both organizations, or to write separate grants under their names of the farms that we would be representing?
Yeah, so certainly, as mentioned, collaborative projects will receive preference during this funding cycle. And so where you feel appropriate, it may make more sense to be collaborative. However, it sounds like there are separate organizations that could potentially apply separately. And we would leave that up to you. But again, since there is some preference given to collaborative, that may be a better route. I don't know the specifics, but.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Joan, I saw your hand go up. Joan Oberndorf.
Yeah, hi. I actually have a couple questions in the chat that if I can just put them out really quickly, it would be great. I am actually representing a farmer's market in Illinois, and my questions are just to see if it's worthwhile for me to look at applying. We have some Illinois farmers, but we have farmers from other surrounding states as well, and I don't know clearly if we got the grant money, it would benefit the Illinois farmers, but it would also benefit others. And I'm wondering if that would render me ineligible. The other question that I have is in terms of infrastructure, if we are building out on our site that's utilized by other organizations for non-food supporting events, if that also would make it less likely or not really worthwhile to apply.
Yeah, thank you. So your first question, I'll address first. So if you're an organization entity, in Joan's example, a farmer's market that supports Illinois farmers and other out-of-state farmers, are you eligible? Absolutely. You're still supporting Illinois farmers and access to Illinois raised produce, meats, etc. In terms of infrastructure that may be used by other entities besides farmers markets, we would encourage you to apply and certainly make the case for how this benefits the local food system. We also imagine if, your examples of farmers market building infrastructure to expand and grow your farmers market. I could also use an example of, say, a commercial kitchen that is primarily focused on, the project getting set up for Illinois farms, but there's part of the season where maybe, it's not farmers using the commercial kitchen and it's a local baker that's trying to scale up a cottage food business, just to make sure the space is maximized for the community. So we would encourage you to please submit your application and just make sure you make it clear how you're supporting the local food system with your infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. The last question that I have, and I think someone else may have sort of touched upon this, is there a deadline for when the funds need to be used? Do they have to be used in the 2024 calendar year?
So part of the application will be to share a timeline for your project. Our requirement, so sort of what our messaging is, the funds should be used immediately and in accordance with your project proposal. There may be work that expands, beyond 2024 into 2025, delays to your project that are beyond your control. That's acceptable. This is not intended to say if you're laying out a 5-year plan for the funds to be spread out over 5 years. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I saw Tracy without a last name had a hand up and then go down. Was your question answered, Tracy?
Thank you. Yes, it was.
Awesome.
Josh, Jesse here with Tulip Tree. I'm just inquiring as to, so there's a part of the project that we're looking at includes, we're installing a new septic system for our commercial kitchen. And it's important that we get that septic scheduled and installed as early as possible. And it sounds like we can't use any funds to back pay something that was already paid. Is that correct? So for instance, if I invested in a septic on the come, basically, because we're going to do it either way, is it possible to use those funds after the award to replenish that? Or do I have to wait to pull the trigger on a septic until after an award?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jesse. So the intent would be for the funds not to be back paying. It's just hard to track that overall if many projects had a similar approach. However, if you installed the septic, actually, let me take your question to my review committee so I don't misanswer it. And I can get back to you.
We can do this in office hours too. That's fine.
Yeah, I'll get back to you. I don't want to misanswer and maybe share something that's specific to you that someone maybe doesn't apply. But yeah, so the idea is not to have it back pay for something where you've sort of expended the cash.
Yeah.
But there are so yeah, I'll take it offline with you.
Okay, thanks.
anyone else? Let's see, Sherry, question in the chat. A project that is considerably more expensive than the $150,000, can we apply for a first phase? So for instance, adding food safe surface drains, plumbing, et cetera, to a building, and then later raise money for equipment, et cetera. Yeah, absolutely, Sherry. If you have a project that is larger than the $150,000 limit for this grant, you may submit a project or submit your application and just clearly outline in your application what the $150,000 is being applied to and how it's going to help you achieve the overall completion of your project. Jessica, I see your hand went up.
Yeah, hi Josh. I'm with Prairie Food Co-op, and obviously a new co-op's gonna improve infrastructure and distribution, and is a millions of dollars project. So we're looking at different pieces and elements like bulk food dispensers or refrigeration that would house local foods. But do we need to have particular suppliers identified? And if we do identify particular suppliers, yeah, you know, at our state, we wouldn't at our stage in development, we wouldn't necessarily have agreements with specific suppliers, just sort of an intent. And I'm not sure how that factors into whether or not then if we identify specific suppliers, if it would be considered collaborative.
Yeah, so collaborative projects, you will need buy-in from any stakeholders. So basically, the simplest way to put it is consent that they have agreed to work with you on this project. However, to apply, you do not have to have specific suppliers identified unless you want them to help you shape the proposal as a collaborator. Otherwise, as long as it's, you know, focused on growing the food system in Illinois with Illinois food, you're encouraged to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see. So I see a question from David. Can we apply as a fiscally sponsored project under a separate 501c3 nonprofit corporate entity, or must we be incorporated and have separate 501c3 status? Are you still on, David? Can you unmute yourself and just provide me with some clarification? Fiscally sponsored project under a separate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there's a standard practice, but not everyone's familiar with this in nonprofit development, where for the first few years, often there's a larger 501c3 that sponsors a community project. Excuse me. So that's called, for the IRS's purpose, a fiscally sponsored project. Okay. And so most foundations and federal funding and so on recognizes this and can work with it, but often enough there are grant proposals and regulations that are written where either the folks involved aren't familiar with that, so they don't write the regulations to accommodate it, or for some technical reason they don't accept that. So I want to clarify that before we proceed, because our corporate status right now is fine as a fiscally sponsored project, but it would involve time and money to change our status and incorporate and so on. Does that make more sense?
Yes. Yeah, that's great. I am one of those individuals who's not familiar with fiscally sponsored projects. So thank you for clarifying. You may apply as a fiscally sponsored project. We will not require at this time for you to incorporate separately. And then just make it clear, you know, there's opportunities in the application to explain the situation to our reviewers. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh, and quick, well, and I hope that the chat will be sent. I put a note in there for those of us who can't save it with the answers, because they're great answers. Thank you.
Yes, we will do that, and we will get them on our FAQ document as well, as many as these questions.
Thanks. Actually, if I have another moment.
Yes.
May I? Just to say, I had also asked the R&D question there. And I'm asking that because we do have both some university relationships and some private sector relationships with people interested in some of the software and development that we're doing for community-based practice. And so documenting all that, providing it as a research practice, requires some equipment. Sometimes, again, grants get very strange about what's called research and what isn't, particularly when it's community-based. If it's a university, it usually has a separate category. We're not that, but we are doing community-based research. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me take that away to our review committee and just make sure I don't misanswer anything. And I will get back to you. And I see your questions here in the chat, so I'll make sure I copy them down as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, let's see. What does reporting look like? Thank you, Karen. So the grant team, we will be sending a questionnaire to all award recipients in July. That will need to be completed in July. It will ask for a progress update, how the funds have been used, what benefits you've seen in your community, and we may we reserve the right to ask for proof of purchase or receipts as well. Since this is a state-funded grant, we have strict requirements that we then have to get to the state. So look for more information on reporting coming soon. We're still defining exactly what that looks like, but those are some example questions. We got a question about higher ed, so I'm just going to share that as well. Yes, educational institutions are eligible. Cottage food businesses are also eligible. So cottage food businesses looking to scale up, that business are encouraged to apply. Again, the minimum grant amount is $1,000. And we do not cover food input. So the grant will not pay for produce, et cetera, but it will pay for infrastructure. Regarding the budget, do they need to be forecasted amounts regarding the infrastructure or actual dollar amounts as accurate as possible? As accurate as possible would be helpful in the review so that we can ensure, sort of the budget is in line with the amount requested. So anywhere where you have exact amounts, maybe it's a particular piece of equipment that you can find online with pricing. We do encourage you to be as accurate as possible. Estimates, are also eligible. Are collaborative projects prioritized over individual projects? So in the scoring, there will be preference to collaborative projects. So because this grant was only funded for 1 year and there is no guarantee of funding beyond, this cycle. And what we mean by that is, however, individual projects are still encouraged to apply. We're not going to choose collaborative over individual. If the individual has a stronger application, it's just one factor in scoring. There are many factors. That's just one of them. Can Kevin asked, will priority be given to vets and individuals with disabilities? There is preference for applications that are vets, disabled, woman-owned, socially disadvantaged. So you will see that in the application. I'm going to pause because Jason, you put your hand up.
Hi there, Josh. Thank you. I apologize if you've already mentioned this, but when it comes to collaborative projects, in terms of fund dissemination, would that go to each separate party in that collaborative effort, or would the payout be to one party for them to disseminate amongst collaborators?
Yeah, so our intent would be for the applicant, so that the person sort of being selected to lead the project would receive the funding and would be responsible for ensuring it gets spent in accordance with the grant and by the collaborators as outlined in the application.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And then Tracy, your hand is back up.
So I did put in the chat box to discuss a little bit more qualification number 13, and that's what I was referring to. I think that's number 13 in the USDA's where the money's coming from, where it talks about disadvantage, women owned. Can you talk a little bit about that? Just the project. So I'm understanding the project does not have to be into that qualification, but would be maybe preferred or would gain better scoring?
That's correct, Tracy. So it is not required. However, again, that's one of the factors in scoring, and will receive points. And that's available. Our score sheet is available on the website as well as a sample of what the review committee will be looking at in terms of projects.
Can I just briefly ask then? And I don't know how this works for cooperatives. If you're community owned, are you counting all of that as ownership?
Yeah, so for cooperatives, it would be our review committee asked the same question, Tracy. So basically, we would think about it as like the farmers you're serving. Who are you serving? And answer that way. Because certainly a cooperative might have 100 owners and check all the boxes. So, but yeah, I mean, use your instincts. We don't want to be so strict that it maybe makes people overthink. But as you're looking at the question and see how it's worded on that application, give the best answer that makes sense for your organization.
Okay, and that makes sense. So think about also to both ends, not just ownership, but also who you're supporting by purchasing products from, as far as Illinois farmers go.
Correct.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Let's see. I saw some more come in the chat. Karen Wilkes asked about letters of support. If you feel the need, you may. However, we don't want letters of support to be a barrier to anybody. So we did not specifically ask for them in the application. You know, we're more putting the responsibility on the applicant to do what they feel is necessary to make the strongest case to the review committee as to how this will benefit their community and the local food system. So I'm just trying to get back. So one question specific to like a compact tractor that would help us increase production. This grant is not intended for farms to invest in infrastructure that increases production. It's more intended for investing in infrastructure that moves the food through the food system from farms to communities. Is infrastructure limited to capital, or can things like packing boxes, distro boxes, pallets, et cetera, be covered? Unfortunately, we would call those other items supplies, recognizing that they may be required. We are limiting this to capital and not including distribution, packing boxes, etc. In a collaborative project, must the funds be shared among collaborators? No, it's not required that you share the funds. It may be a need that the collaborative project is investing in specific infrastructure for one of the collaborators, locations, sites, etc. And you may choose as a group how you are using those funds. Again, at the time of application in your budget, in accordance with your budget and timeline. Would a food truck selling locally sourced and value-added products count as infrastructure? Yes, short answer. So again, provided locally sourced is defined as grown and produced in Illinois for the sake of our grant. And that you can make the case of how the food truck is benefiting the community and the local food system to our review committee. We would encourage you to think about that as infrastructure. I've also heard some people start talking about mobile commercial kitchens, sort of using food trucks for canning, and if they can get that, certified by a health department. So that's another creative way of, they would call it a food truck, but it's not the traditional sense. We've talked about cottage food producers are eligible. I see, thank you, Ed. We did share the sample score sheet in the chat. If anyone wants to look at it, there's a link around 12:50. I see it's 12:55. So I am going to follow up again on your question, David, regarding biologicals that you're developing, bio-based infrastructure, compost beds, etc. I just want to make sure I answer that completely and accurately. Is a 4-season greenhouse eligible? We are a nursery. We grow and sell both edibles and non-edible potted plants. So again, just to reiterate, we are not intending for this to be invested in infrastructure that scales up growing and production. It is focused on the value added and distribution arm of the local food infrastructure. However, we encourage everybody to apply. So if with your 4-season greenhouse, you believe you can make the case for how it's going to benefit your community and help with access to local foods and improving the local food system, we would encourage you to apply and make that case to the review committee through your application. We view this as a broad opportunity to expand the local food system in Illinois, and it is in its inaugural year with the goal of ultimately getting the state legislature to fund this beyond this current cycle. And so we're trying to be very open-minded about the applications and what comes through. With that, I'm looking at the clock, 12:57 here in Moni. Last call for 1 or 2 more questions. All right, thank you all for attending. Please submit your application before our deadline of January 31st, 2024. And also, register for open office hours or submit questions for further follow-up. Appreciate everyone's time and have a great afternoon.